So we have built in the Sydney Alliance relationships with the Archdiocese of the Catholic Church, the Jewish Board of Deputies, 9 unions, but within those unions a mix of unions, public sector, private sector, left, right, and so forth. Western Sydney Community Forum, the Arab Council of Australia, the Uniting Church, and then their members. So we have dozens of active congregations and active parishes across the city. We ask not for passive relationships from these people. We're not into sending out press releases. We have press releases. We haven't sent out a press release. We've been organising for 4 years. They pay to run the Alliance, and that means paying for other staff, and they involve their members. We've had 1,000 people from these organisations through 2-day training. We're quite serious about building deep inside of these organisations. And because of the diversity, because when you go for more, you have to move more slowly to follow a less is more strategy, we've taken 3 years to build relationships before we're going to step into the public arena. Oh, good. Right, step 2 is about building an agenda. So, and successful coalitions build an agenda through listening and strategising around mutual interests. There were 2 things that Teachers Federation case study, the Teachers Federation and the Public Education Alliance did really well in forming, that ended up seeing them form that agenda around smaller class sizes. Firstly, they asked, not told, when they tried to find out what the issues were. Lots of progressive campaigns are based on the idea that people know what the answer is and we've just got to go recruit people to the cause. The Federation did exactly the opposite. They ran the public education inquiry run by Tony Vinson, went round to schools and ran hearings with parents and teachers, and he asked the question, if there was one thing you could change to improve your school community, what would it be? And people told him. Lots of new ideas, dozens and hundreds of new ideas. Indeed, 96 recommendations were written up by Tony Vinson. Lots of issues were surfaced through this listening process. But of course, anyone who's ever run a campaign knows that a 96-point plan is probably not going to get up. So the Public Education Coalition discerned that agenda and narrowed it down to some prioritised demands, and in particular reducing class sizes. And the beauty of reducing class sizes as an issue was that it was about combining the mutual interests of the organisations around the table. Parents had an interest in it because their kids would have quality time with their teachers. Teachers had an interest in it because it would actually reduce their workload pressures. It was mutually in the interest of those organisations. It wasn't just a teacher union issue. It wasn't just a parent issue. It was an education community issue, and that was the richness of what they were able to produce. The Sydney Alliance intends to do the same thing. We haven't come to the table with a set of issues. This confuses a lot of people. You know, a lot of people are used to the idea that you would organise a coalition around public transport or public education or healthcare or so forth. We're not doing that. We're not trying to organise a coalition around a specific set of issues. We're trying to organise a coalition based around building power for civil society in Sydney. So instead, we've come to the table to build relationships first, and that's why we're doing so much training and why we're taking so long to build. We're using the practices of community organising, however, to form that agenda. We're doing things called listening campaigns. It's not foreign to organising in Sydney, and certainly the Public Education Inquiry used a similar process, where we go and actually initiate discussion in our organisations about how Sydney should be run and what are causing problems in people's lives. If there was one thing you'd change in your community, what would it be? And then creating a space for people to act on those concerns. We've engaged 3,000 people in listening campaigns over the last 6 months, asking them those exact questions. And we're about to start prioritising issues. We're doing it through an assembly where individuals from those organisations come together and they make commitments about what they're prepared to work on, and that will help us prioritise the issues that we work on. But of course, that very expansive agenda then needs to be connected to our organisations. And so we're also engaging our organisations to ask them about what their interests are. But we're not going to work on issues that are just badged or projected as simply one organisation's interest. We're not going to work on just union issues or just church issues or just community organisation issues. We're going to work on issues that bring the interests of those different organisations together. There's plenty that our organisations disagree on. You could imagine. If anyone was paying attention to the list of organisations that I said, I'm sure you can imagine. Teachers Federation and the Archdiocese of the Catholic Church. There's stuff that they agree on, but there's plenty of stuff that they disagree on. We're not talking about funding allocations between religious and public schools. But you know what? Both of those organisations have a deep and abiding interest and shared concerns about racialised bullying that's happening between kids in schools, particularly in southwestern Sydney. And that's something that both those organisations have a deep and abiding interest to fix. So there's plenty of stuff that people can work on, even though there seem to be apparent differences. There's also quite a rich space for common good between our organisations. Then step 3, to build a strong coalition, certainly what the Teachers Federation and the Public Education Coalition did, is be prepared to confront all decision makers in a non-partisan way to win your agenda. And this is where this kind of organising is going to be, and I expect it to be, and I hope it is, a challenge for all political parties in Sydney. The Public Education Coalition played this role very well. The Public Education Alliance negotiated openly with both the Liberal Party and the Labor Party around the reduction in class sizes policies. They used a public assembly at the Sydney Town Hall that was held in February just before a state election, where they put pressure on both parties to make commitments around a united set of demands that included a reduction in class sizes. And actually it was the Liberal Party that supported the class sizes policy first, and then the Labor Party supported it. It was the fact that they were prepared to quite openly negotiate for improvements in schools with whoever was a decision maker in New South Wales that was critical to their victory. Like this, the Sydney Alliance is explicitly non-partisan while being actively political. We don't call ourselves progressives. It's too narrow a framework for us to capture the kinds of people who are involved in our organisations. We're organising a much more diverse constituency of people. Plenty of our people have given up on politics. Plenty of our people have never been interested in progressive politics or party politics. They've seen such politics as self-serving rather than serving community needs. But because of their faith or their experiences in taking collective action, as individuals, they're very committed to wanting to take action to improve Sydney for the common good. They're not interested in internal conversations about how parties work. They are interested in whether the aged care facilities that exist in their community are going to support their parents and them when they get older. They are concerned about the fact that Sydney housing prices are completely unaffordable for most people who live here and causing incredible economic stress and cost of living pressures. And they are concerned about the rising tide of racial bullying, especially in schools. They're issues that they want to take action on. How they take action is going to be different to to forms of action that have typically personified so-called progressive politics. So these people want to engage politically, but they want to do so in a totally different way to how the Labor Party and other political parties are used to. So let me make it really clear. Coalition building in this sense is totally different to the strategy of Labourism. It's a different piece in the jigsaw puzzle to politics. Labourism is often personified by more quiet relationships between unions and the Labor Party. We are talking, the Sydney Alliance and our role in the way we're building this coalition is actually about seeking public relationships and public accountability. And I would call it, I like to think of it as we want to engage with all political parties in an exercise of responsible confrontation, where there's responsibility on both sides for how we act in the public arena. In terms of civil society, we've taken a lot of responsibility on. We've spent 3 years getting organised. We're not going into the public arena without already being powerful and already having a powerful set of relationships. We're not going to just shout at politicians. We're organised, have built our power and are going to negotiate with politicians. And we're going to have the same approach to our issues. We've identified what the issues are. We are then going to canvass widely solutions to those issues and go to politicians with crafted solutions to the problems we've identified from our members, not simply going to politicians and asking them to act randomly on these issues. We're going to develop the solutions for them to help them be able to act as public servants. But there's also responsibility at the side of politicians and political parties in this space, because we're, as organised civil society, are expecting politicians to be responsible as public figures. And that means us being prepared and expecting them to be held to public account. So we will be we'll be relating to all politicians and being prepared to challenge them in ways that are unfamiliar. This is not a familiar way politics is often done in Sydney. For the Labor Party, who's used to sometimes more cordial relationships, the Sydney Alliance doesn't want to be mates with the Labor Party. We're building a political force in Sydney, and we're doing it so we can create public relationships of mutual respect. And we're seeking the same relationship with the Liberal Party as we are with the Labor Party, because we want to hold all politicians accountable as public servants. And what that will mean is that we will congratulate politicians when they work with us to solve the problems we've identified in Sydney. And when they don't, we're not going to sit around and whinge and bitch and moan. We are going to organise to change them. So this is the kind of coalition building that I see as an essential part of renewing democratic politics. It's a much bigger picture than simply looking at the problems in the Labor Party as something that is internal. It's actually taking a step back from that and saying there is a crisis in our democracy. There is a crisis in our democracy because civil society has not been sufficiently organised to be able to be in negotiation with those who seek to govern us and those who seek to organise the market. And so Sydney Alliance, and using successful coalition strategies, has gone to set itself the responsibility of organising itself so it can then initiate that kind of negotiation to hold politics to account. Thanks.